So as I mentioned before we got started, time space is probably the most popular topic regarding taxes that Civitas Strategies uh, educates providers on. It really is time after time after time because it is so crucial for you as a family child care provider using your home for personal and business that you have a really good understanding of the time space calculation. Because without that, you could potentially be leaving money on the table every time you do your taxes. So maybe you've underestimated your time space calculation and it's time to go ahead and recalculate it. Maybe sometimes it's a little too high and you just want to be careful and make sure that you have calculated it properly. So let's jump in here because time space is so important to maximize your tax deductions, gives you a clear picture of your business finances, and keeps us out of trouble with the IRS. Before we get started, just going to do a quick disclaimer that the information contained here has been prepared by Civitas Strategies and is not intended to constitute legal, tax, or financial advice. The Civitas Strategies team has used reasonable efforts in collecting, preparing, and providing this information, but does not guarantee its accuracy, completeness, adequacy, or currency. The publication and distribution of this information is not intended to create, and receipt does not constitute an attorney-client or any other advisory relationship. Reproduction of this information is expressly prohibited. Only non-commercial uses of this work are permitted. I guess it would have been nice if I had said who I am, right? Who's speaking to you? I did recognize some names that are attending, so it's nice to see everybody again. I'm Jen Bale. I am the Director of Professional Learning at Civitas, and I also happen to lead and am part of our tax team, our tax education team. So having said that, again, right, time space is something that whenever I'm working with providers with tax education questions, time space comes up when I'm working with family child care. So what are we going to actually speak about today? Well, we cannot discount the importance of the time space calculation. I want everybody to understand why you use it, when you use it, right? So time space, extremely critical. Time space basically revolves around the concept of either regular use space in your home or exclusive use space. So we're going to talk about what are the differences there, right? And because if we don't know that, if we can't determine what every space is, regular use or exclusive use, we can't properly calculate time space. So say that there. And then what's nice is we do have a step-by-step instruction for you to calculate your own time space percentage. I'm going to walk you through the steps. A lot of times what happens when I speak to providers about time space percentages, they think it's really difficult. And it isn't. It's honestly 6 steps. And when you start to break it down and really think about those steps, it's not hard at all. All right. So the beauty, why is time space important? Well, the beauty of being a family child care business, using your home for both personal and business, is the fact that you have so many expenses, right, that are shared between business and personal home use. Business use of home is what that is referred to in taxes. So the ability to have expenses that are for your business, but within your personal home, called the business use of home. And there's even a tax form that addresses the business use of home. And it's where you put your time space calculation in. It's form number 8829. So if you're looking over your taxes and you come upon form 8829, that's the business use of home. And that's where all of these expenses that are shared between your person with your home and business, right? That's where all of that information goes there. So, understanding that, hey, if these are accurately calculated, 1, we're doing exactly what the IRS wants us to do, but 2, we are taking full allowable advantage of these expenses that normally, if we didn't have a business, we would be paying in full. Home expenses, not all of them, but some of them. And the idea that now we use our home for business allows us to basically benefit and kind of take a percentage of those expenses. Home-based childcare businesses are the only businesses in the United States that can use business use of home. So I say that, one, because this is great that we can do this, right? The other thing I want everybody to know is that the IRS understands how home-based family care business, childcare businesses work. They are very, very well aware of all of the types of expenses that you would have, both as your regular expenses for running your childcare, but also the expenses that are allowable when you're sharing your business, sharing your home with your business, right? So the IRS is really, really aware about family childcare. And as a result, we want to make sure that you always want to make sure with the IRS, right, that we're following every single rule that we possibly can. But keeping in mind that the IRS knows a lot of specifics about the family child care businesses as a whole. And that's one of the reasons why we stick with and have a really good understanding of time space, because we want you to be able to maximize your deductions legally and ethically as per required by the IRS. And we want you to be able to have a clearer picture once you know what percentage you are allowed to claim. It gives you a great understanding of the financial health of your business, because taxes, that's what taxes do. When we're well aware of our taxes, we have our finger on the pulse of the financial health of our business. The other reason I really want you to understand time space is because there are things such as if you received grant funds and you had expenses that were applicable, shared between home and business, and you had to account for that grant money, having used that grant money for those expenses, you have to take the time space portion of that expense. And that's what you would tell whoever has issued you the grant. That's what you would say that amount of the expense is. So if you had a grant that was allowing you to, it was covering utilities, that grant isn't covering all of your utilities, it's covering the time space percentage of the utility. So when you would go to do documentation for the grant, right, proving that you spent the money properly, please keep in mind that the expenses that you're going to show for the grant are going to be after you've applied time space. So that's also a way that you can make sure that you are really fulfilling all of the requirements if you are receiving any type of grant money. So I put that out there, right? Because what does that mean? Time space is a tool that really allows you to have a great handle on your taxes, to be conforming to all rules and regulations. And if you happen to be involved receiving some grant money, you want to make sure that you are properly allocating that grant money for what you are allowed to spend it on, the correct percentage, right? So we want to always think about that. Let's think about, if we're talking about business use of home, what could some of these expenses be? And what are some expenses that are not allowed? So common time space calculations really do revolve around all of the usual expenses that you have in owning your home, if they relate in some way to the business. But I just want to put out front, never your mortgage payment. All right. So you see here on the screen, mortgage interest. So you are able to take your mortgage interest for the year, apply your time space percentage, and that amount of your mortgage interest is entered on the form 8829, the business use of home, and you get to claim that percentage of your mortgage interest as an allowable expense, but not your mortgage payment. And the reason for that is your home is a fully owned asset for you, right? And we cannot also take that asset as a tax deduction. So I want everybody to understand that. But you will see, what's the first thing there that says rent? Well, rent, those rent payments, your monthly rent payments, is not giving you equity in the home. It is not an asset that you own or will own as long as you are paying rent. So a time space percentage of rent is allowable. but a time space percentage of the actual mortgage payment itself isn't. But mortgage interest is, and that can really, really add up. So you're going to want to make sure that you're taking your mortgage interest into consideration. The same form that you use to claim your mortgage interest as a whole on your 1040, right? The same form you get from your mortgage company. You're going to see the interest is listed there, and you're going to apply your time space percentage to the interest. A great thing. We're going to do the same thing with our property taxes. So our property taxes, all across the country, Georgia included, property taxes can be pretty high. And it's great that you're going to be able to take a percentage of those property taxes. Now, when you're doing your 1040 or a tax preparer is doing your 1040, depending on how you're choosing to file, you may not be including your property taxes in these tax years. You may not actually be entering that. But we all know we get a tax bill from the county or however your taxes are set up in your locale. So you're going to be taking the property tax for the year. I know some states break it up in two payments, right? First half of the year, second half of the year. Make sure you're claiming the whole year, and you take the time space percentage, boom, on the property taxes. The same thing's going to happen with all of your utilities. You are going to add up your utilities and use the time space percentage. When you're on Form 8829, it is not broken out by electricity, water, gas. It is all considered to be utilities. So you're going to be keeping some great record keeping throughout the year, monthly statements. They might be on your phone. I don't know how many people still receive paper statements, but you're going to be keeping track of that because a percentage, the time space percentage of your utilities is an allowable expense, right? So we're going to want to do that. Homeowners insurance, absolutely no different. You are entitled to take the time space percentage of your homeowners insurance. Maintenance and repairs, there are two interesting things. So if you're a sole proprietor or a single member LLC, the other tax form for your business is called the Schedule C, right? And on the Schedule C, there is a place there for repairs. That is only referring to repairs that are for a place in your home that is not used personally at all. But repairs that are shared between your home and your business go on the 8829, and you get to take a percentage, which is pretty, is really, really nice. But again, please remember, it's not your full mortgage payment. And if you can think of any type of questions, if you have any expenses that you've always been wondering, hey, is this allowable with time space? You can put them in the chat if you would like. You can hold them to the end. We are going to do a little bit of Q&A. I'll try to talk a little faster so I don't run over time. So we are going to answer questions. And because I like to say it over and over again, please, as an aside, please put your name and your PDS number in the chat so that you can get credit for attending there. So, the great thing is if you had a time space percentage of 30%, you would be able to take 30% of these annual expenses, right, as an allowable business expense, and that can be really, really significant. That's a pretty large number. So we want to make sure that everything is calculated properly. When you have an expense that is dedicated to the business, time space doesn't apply, right? So if we had a situation, well, first of all, our liability insurance, right? Liability insurance is for our business, and we're going to be able to expense that 100%. So you want to keep that in mind. If you had something like a dedicated phone line for your business, that would be something that would be 100%, right? If you have a playground equipment that is only used by the children in your care and not for family, that is 100% expense. But you do also have these shared expenses, and they do that. Those expenses do really, really add up on your taxes. All right. So by understanding time space, you're taking a significant step forward with your allowable expenses and lowering your tax liability. So time space does, as I mentioned before, it all comes down to having an understanding of two different kinds of space in your home. One is regular use space. The other is exclusive use space. And we're going to look at some examples of each. It's really important that you understand how you distinguish regular use space from exclusive use space, because time space, both time and space are regular use space involves both time and space. Exclusive use space only involves space, right? Because if it's regular use and we're sharing it between our home and our business, we need to know the amount of space and we need to know the amount of time that it's used. When we're talking about exclusive use space, it's exclusively for the business. So we're going to think about it just in terms of the space. And when we walk through the time space calculation, you'll see what I mean. But I like to kind of plant that seed. So let's think first about regular use space. And of course, I don't know how your individual childcare businesses are set up. There is usually a mix between regular use and exclusive use space. If you have a home business, it is your home, but you are only using it for the childcare, those expenses are going to be considered to be exclusive use expenses, 100% expensable, and are going to be claimed on your Schedule C versus your 8829. So because we're not going, if you have a circumstance and it does come up, people will say, I own a home, it is a family child care, but all I use that home for is family child care, no personal use at all. That is allowed. It is allowed. But in those instances, time space doesn't apply, right? Because we're only using it for business. But most family child care have regular use space and exclusive use space. So when we think about regular use, that is something, a space in your home that serves a dual purpose, right? It's used by your business during operating hours. Doesn't have to be every hour, doesn't have to be every day that your business is open, but it is something that is consistently a space, consistently used for your childcare business. It's also used for your personal life, right? So it's something that it's this dual purpose space. We use it for our business, doesn't have to be every day, but we also use it personally. All right. So if we think about different types of regular use space, it could be your living room, right? If you are caring for children in your living room, or even if you're only doing perhaps an activity in your living room once or twice a week, a couple times a month, but on a consistent basis, your living room is a regular use space. So expenses surrounding that are going to, time space is going to apply, and we're going to be measuring that regular use space and adding it all together. Your kitchen, right? If you're preparing meals for the children do not need to eat in the kitchen for the kitchen to be considered a regular use space. If you have shared bathrooms can be considered regular use space. Now, here's the interesting thing. Yard outdoor play areas. What I'd like you to think about is that that means that if they are shared between your family and the children, and there are a lot of intricacies when it comes to outdoor spaces, if they are shared between your family and the children in your care, you are going to be using time space for those expenses. You're not going to be measuring that outdoor space. So we don't measure the playground, we don't measure the fences. Those are all things that are going to be allowable business expenses, whether with regular having to use time space because it's shared use or exclusive, but we don't measure those outdoor spaces. We don't add those to our time space calculation. So when we get to that point and we talk about the measuring of areas, keep in mind it is not the yard space. If you had an physically attached deck to your home and the children play there, you care for the children, you would be able to measure that and include that in your regular use space. I caution when it comes to garages, you might want to speak to a tax preparer because there are a couple of different approaches that people take when it comes to garage space and time space, because you certainly can keep toys in that space. Please speak to a tax preparer, however, about how you should go about calculating that. So just like to say that there. So we can see that regular use spaces, what's factored into those is the amount of space in your home and the amount of time that space is used. So whenever we think about regular use, we think about we have to measure time and we have to measure space. So we think about when it comes to exclusive use spaces, those are areas in your home that are only used for childcare purposes. No no family purpose, excuse me, no family purpose whatsoever. And we have to be strict about that. So if you had a room that is only used for the childcare, a classroom that's only used for the childcare, that's an exclusive use space. Fantastic. If we had some kind of storage that was only used for the childcare, for supplies for the childcare, for toys for the childcare, any kind of materials, that is exclusive use space. If we had a situation in our home where we had a private entrance only used by families and the childcare, our families do not run in and out of that entrance. Expenses related to that and the measuring of that, those are considered to be exclusive use spaces. I will say that if you have a room that 99.9% of the time is for childcare, but we also have a treadmill in the corner, and your husband uses the treadmill every once in a while, right? How many times do people use treadmills? But there's personal equipment in there that somebody in your family would use. It's no longer considered to be exclusive use space. So please just keep those things in mind. Using a family bedroom, perhaps your older children, there's a bedroom in your home, you use it for nap time because nobody's home during that time period. That is a regular use space, not an exclusive use space, right? Because our children are going to be sleeping there and using that room when the child care is not operating, but we're using it for nap time. So areas where children are napping, if it's shared with your family, that's a regular use space, not an exclusive use space. And exclusive use spaces, when we talk about the value that they have in time space, it's only about the space because 100% of the time they're used for business. And I'm going to show you when we do the time space calculation, how exclusive use space weighs in your favor. So I really do want you to measure all of your exclusive use space. I want you to stop and think about the spaces in your home that are 100% used for the child care, because that can be a big factor in you having a larger but legitimate time space percentage. All right, so just going into that there. So we did mention a couple of different scenarios, right? So regular versus exclusive. Let's just take a look here. So if Sarah is using her living room and it's filled with toys and activities during the day, children are being cared for there. They're fantastic. They're using it for the business, but the family's watching TV and hanging out there at night and playing games and everything. That is a regular use space. So we're going to be measuring that space, but we know that we have to think about both the time it's used, the amount of time it's used for business, and the actual amount of space itself. So the next situation is Tom's spare bedroom is set up as a preschool classroom, not used for anything else. Exclusive use space, right? We love it there. Maria's kitchen, it's used for prepping meals during the day, but it's used for family meals at night. Regular use space. And here we have a situation where Lisa's basement is set up for the childcare business and it's not used at all when the business is not operating. So Lisa, at the end of the day, when she's finally done with business, she closes that door and the family does not use that space at all. Exclusive use. So it's not really difficult to determine which of the two types of space it is, right? Regular use or exclusive use. I'll just throw out here that the IRS reserves the right to come into your home and measure your space. Not kidding. So we always, with our taxes, we want to be 100% honest, and time space is no different. All right, so keep that in mind. Now, this is where we understand now regular use space and we understand exclusive use space. We understand the differences. What we're going to do is we're going to walk through how you calculate the time space percentage. Um, it's easy. It's 6 easy steps. They're not difficult at all. When you look at them, at first you're like, oh, that's a lot of things going on. Nope. Let's break it down step by step. Okay. And this, and just so you know, time space percentages can change year to year on your taxes because often the way that you use space in your home changes from year to year. So the IRS is not, if we were claiming in 2023 44% time space, and now we're claiming 56% time space because we all of a sudden had more space that was being used as exclusive use space than regular use space. It drove up the time space percentage we're allowed. That is okay. So often when you think about your taxes, you will hear about things that you cannot jump back and forth in years. Basically choosing how you want to expense your automobile expenses. You have to pick one method, stick with it. The way that you calculate and report your food expenses, you pick one method and you stick with it. But with the time space percentage, it is understood that it can vary from year to year. And I do really encourage you to stop and think before you start to either hand your taxes to a tax preparer, or if you're getting ready to do them yourself, think, did any space change over that last tax year? Because it can change. So let's look at the steps, and I don't want anybody to just kind of go like, oh, this is a lot there. It isn't. What we need to do is we're going to be measuring these spaces, right? And everything surrounds, when it comes to the space portion of time space, it surrounds square feet. And how do we get square feet? We just take the longest measurement of a room, now feet, longest measurement of the room, the longest, the width of the room. So basically longest length and then the width of the room. And those two numbers get multiplied together, and that gives a percentage. All right, so if we look at this first step, oh, and I will say, one thing you have to have all the time is you must know the total square feet in your home. And that might be on the papers that you signed when you bought the house. It could be if you did an assessment, if anybody came in and you refinanced your mortgage, you will have an accounting of how many square feet are in your home. So we're going to take that number, how many square feet we have in our home, and we are going to use it for both regular use space and exclusive use space. So step number 1, determine the square feet of your regular use space. We're going to measure the length and width of every space that we use that's shared between our personal and our business. And we're going to add all of those square feet together. It's going to give us a nice size number, right? I'm going to take that number and I'm going to divide it by the number of square feet of my entire home. That gives me percentage number 1. That is the space percentage of my regular use space. Fantastic. But because my regular use space is shared between my business and my home, I also have to think about the amount of time that regular use space is utilized, right? So we have our first percentage for space, the space portion of regular use. We're now going to think about the amount of time that the regular use space is devoted to the business. So what that basically means is that you would be adding up all the hours of the day that the child care is open, plus any prep time, cleanup time. We add up all of those hours and we know, okay, it's this many hours in a day. You add how many days of the week are you open, right? I'm going to multiply those hours by the number of days that I'm open. And then I'm going to multiply, because that gives me how many hours I'm open a week, business week. And then I'm going to multiply that business week by the number of weeks that we're open, right? Because a lot of people close for vacations or holidays. I add up I take all of those calculations, and what does that do? It gives me all of the numbers that my home is used, all of the hours that my home is used for business, right? We're taking all of that into account. I'm going to take that number and I'm going to divide it by the number of hours in a year. which is 8,760. When I do that, I get percentage number 2. I'm going to take the first percentage, which was the space portion of regular use space. And now I've got the second percentage, which is the time percentage of regular use space. And I multiply those two together. And that gives me a percentage for my regular use space, the time space percentage for that. But exclusive use space basically drives up the number, increases the number of your time space calculation that you're going to use on your taxes. So the next thing you do, right, is you measure every last bit of your exclusive use space. We go, we measure all of that square feet, we add it all together. Now we're going to do just like we did with regular space. I've got all that exclusive use space. I divide it by the total number of total amount of square feet in my home, and that gives me a percentage. We then take the exclusive use percentage for space that we just got, and we add it to the time space percentage that we got for our regular use space. We add those two together. So when we're coming up with time space for the regular, we're multiplying two percentages together. When we are thinking about the overall time space percentage we're able to take for exclusive use and regular use combined, we add those two percentages together. So let us go then to just the example of how you calculate square feet. And the reason that I bring this up is because people do ask us. So what we're going to do is you're going to get a tape measure. You're probably going to want somebody to help you. So you're going to basically attach that tape measure to one wall of the longest space, and we're going to measure the amount of feet there, right? We're going to extend that across. Great. We measure the length of the room. Then what we're going to do is we're going to look for the shortest wall because that's the width of that space. Same thing. Let's just measure the feet of that, basically measure all of the feet of that room. All right. Basically, when you take those two measurements for each space and you multiply them together, they're going to tells you the number of square feet for that space. And then we're going to add all of the square feet for, let's say that was exclusive use. We're going to add all of those square feet together. If it was regular use, we're going to add all the square feet for the regular use, right? So calculating the square feet, it's not difficult. Longest length, the width is also the shortest portion of the room. We take those two numbers, we multiply them together. That gives us the number of square feet of that space. So the example here is if a room was 12 feet long and the width was 10 feet, 12 by 10, 120 square feet. That's for just that room, right? And I'm going to do that for every space in my home. And remember, we're separating exclusive use space and regular use space. And you can use oddly shaped, you can have corners and nooks and crannies and things like that. And what you do is you make a measurement of that little space, and then you can make a measurement there. And then you can add them together for the overall. So if you have an oddly shaped room, kind of divide it into, you can think about it as rectangles. Have an oddly shaped closet, divide it as rectangles and add that together if you are unable to just measure the length and the width of the space. So that's how we calculate square feet. Now, let us go back to all those steps that we had. Step number 1, determine the square feet of the area in the home that is regular use space, shared between home and business. We're going to measure the length and width of each room. We're going to multiply those two numbers together. We've got the square feet for that room, and then we're going to add that up for all regular use space. So in this situation, my living room was 200 square feet, my kitchen was 150 square feet. I used 300 square feet of the basement for both business and my family, 650 square feet for the regular use space. I've got that number, 650, and now I'm going to divide them. Well, what did we do here? Oh, they came up with the space percentage. I think they jumped ahead on me because what I want to do, they did jump ahead, I apologize. So what we are going to do, right, is we're going to take the total number of square feet in our home. We've got the square amount of square feet for this regular use space, and we're going to divide it. I see they call it total home space instead. Yeah, I use a different term, right? So basically, to get the space percentage of the regular use space, we take all of that regular use square feet that we added up and we divide it by the total number of square feet in our home. So in this example, we've got 2,000 square feet, our whole home, and we measured 650 square feet of regular use space. That resulted in a 32.5% use of regular use space in my home. That's a percentage that we're going to put to the side. Now we need to calculate the time that we were, the times portion of the regular use space. So we need to calculate all of the hours that were open, any prep time, any cleanup time, any times throughout the year, the week that you do business activities in the home, even if the home is closed, you can do that. Or if you happen to also the business host birthday parties or things of that nature, add up all those hours. So here's an example. 12 hours a day. In this instance, what I would say is, hey, this is a business that was open 10 hours a day, did cleanup 1 hour in the beginning of the day, prep for 1 hour in the beginning of the day, cleanup for an hour at the end. That gives me 12 hours in a day. I'm open 5 days a week, and I'm only open 48 weeks a year. I am on vacation for 4 weeks. I'm closed for 4 weeks. So what we do is we take all of those hours and we basically, and they put 20 hours, but what we're going to do is we're going to take all the hours in a year minus the time that we were closed. I see how this is a way that you can do this. So basically, instead of using that 3,760 hours in a year, in this particular instance, we are calculating the number of hours in the year that we actually could be open because we could be using the space, right? Because we're closed otherwise. And we take that number, we take all of the hours that we are using for the business and we divide it by the total number of hours in a year. I will tell you that the 3,760 is the standard number. 8,760, I apologize. That is the standard number of hours in a year. So if you take a look at this, this is the example that I personally like. I add up all of the hours that I'm open, and then I take that number and I divide it, well, the hours I'm open in a year, and I divide it by all of the hours in a year, 8,760, and that gives me the percent of the time that I'm using regular use space, 33.1%. So I'd like everybody to stop and think about that. Stick with the 8,760. It's better, it's easier for you for your calculation. It's more commonly used. We probably had a participant in the audience who asked about calculating it, not including the time that they were closed. And that you can do that as well. But for our purposes, let's stick with the 8760. I like that. That is more common. So that gave me my percentage for my time that I use in my regular use space. And I take those two numbers, the space percentage, the time percentage, multiply them together. That now gave me the time space percentage for regular use space, 10.76%. Now I've got to think about exclusive use. I've measured all of that, right? Measured that. Then I am going to measure all the square feet, add them all up, take the number of square feet that's exclusive use, and divide it by the total number of square feet in my home. In our example, we had 100 square feet exclusive use space. Our total home was 2,000 square feet. Boom, what do? I divide my exclusive use by the total number of square feet in the home. That gives me a percentage. And in this example, which this is low for family child care, but here basically what we have is we have a 10.76% for that regular use time space, and we had a 5% space use for exclusive use, and we add those two together, and that gives us the time space example. So just having kind of walked through that. This is another example for you using some other measurements. All right, so in this instance, we measured 700 square feet in our regular use space. Our home is 1,500 square feet. I take the 700 square feet, I divide it by the 1,500 square feet. That gave me 46.7%. That is the space percentage of regular use space. Let's figure out the time percentage of regular use space. I was open 12 hours a day, 5 days a week. I was open 50 weeks a year, 3,000 hours. I worked 3,000 hours divided by 8,760 total number of hours in a year. That's what I like to use. That gave me 34.2%. I multiply those two percentages together. I don't add them. I multiply them. That gave me 16%, 15.99 rounded up to 16. Then I think about my exclusive use space. In this example, it's 500 square feet. I divide that 500 square feet of exclusive use space by the 1,500 square feet of my total home, and that gave me 33.3%. I add 33.3 to 16%, that gives me 49.3%. That is the amount of my time space percentage that I'm going to be able to use on my taxes. So it isn't difficult. It's these 6 steps, right? Very, very straightforward. So please, understand it's not difficult. Now, I went through all of this, but my coworker Margaret is going to put a link in the chat for us that actually will help us with the calculation. So there is a free time space calculator. You have to do all your measuring, right? But when you've put in the accurate measurements and you've put in the accurate amount of time that you use your regular use space, it will perform the calculation for you. So Margaret is going to put that in the chat for us. So you certainly have that as a way to, you can double check yourself, right? I want everybody to understand how time space works, because once you understand that, even if you have a calculator, I like everybody to be able to walk through and figure it out, because you want to make sure that you're not making a mistake. Something common that I see with tax preparers who don't understand time space is just every tax return, they say 50% time space. They bring you in to do your taxes. You say, I use about half my house for my business. And they just automatically put 50% time space. That's not accurate. I will tell you, when they get to be higher numbers, let's say over 75%, the higher, please, always, you want documentation for everything, but really make sure that that's an accurate number, because 75%, that's on the high side, right? 80%, 90%, I've seen some very, very high percentages. Just be prepared to be able to defend those if the IRS were ever to ask you. So we have a couple different little real world scenarios. So, if we had a situation where, let's say, somebody is using a partial use of the room. So in this instance, Jenny uses half of her living room for childcare. She measures the entire room, but she only counts 150 square feet in the calculation. That is fine, because in that particular instance, she was able to divide and say, oh, we never use this half of the room for childcare. We only use this half. So she measured the space used for childcare, not the entire space. That's correct, and that's legitimate there. When it comes to seasonal programs, if you happen to have programs that only run, let's say, for a summer, what you basically are going to do is you're only going to be calculating that by the 12 weeks of operation, not by that 8,760. And that's why when we saw that first example, that sometimes people will back out the amount of hours that they are closed and start with a number from there. We are, for our purposes, let's use the 8,760. But in this particular instance, if it's a summer only program, right, there's going to be a lower time space percentage because it's not open. The business isn't open as long, right? So we want to kind of keep that in mind there. Nap times, we talked about that, right? If a bedroom is used for nap times, but also used by the family, hey, that's a regular use space. We're going to measure that full space. Home office space. If you have a home office and it is only used for the business, you don't do any of your personal accounting there, nothing of that nature. It's only used for the business. You like to do the business there, close the door and pretend it doesn't exist, exclusive use space. If it's a space that you do all of your business work, but you also use it for the family, your personal calculations and business, and it's a shared computer, whatever your setup is, that's a regular use space, not exclusive. And then when it comes to outdoor space, you'll never measure the square feet of the yard, but the expenses that you would have in a playground, any expenses there, if it's shared with your children, it's considered to be applying time space. If it's only used by the children in your care, those expenses are 100% because that technically is an exclusive use, but we're not measuring the outdoor playground and adding that to our time space percentage. If you had an attached deck, right, that you can measure and add to the total square feet of your home. Every home is different. So I do want you to just kind of keep in mind, right? Every home is different there. With all taxes, what we're talking about here, these are crucial for the time space, but a lot of smart things here in terms of thinking about record keeping as a whole. So record keeping are always multiple steps. It's a good idea basically to look at the floor plan of your home if you haven't, or draw one out to determine regular use and exclusive use space, just something that you can do. Making sure that you have a log of your operating hours, because don't rob yourself of hours that you are using for the business that are not business days, right? So maybe you're doing some work, accounting work on the weekends. You're doing, maybe you had a couple weekends where you did some work putting up flyers and or let's say arts and crafts and things like that for the children. Those are hours that are included that you add to your business. So keeping a log can get you a lot more business hours. With anything, right? We're always going to save any receipts for any expense that is being added to our taxes, all receipts. Documenting things with photos can be a really good idea to show that a space is regularly used or exclusively used for the business, right? Taking photos of the space. Using digital calendars, that basically can help you track the amount of hours, right? If you basically are kind of like logging in, logging out, could help you track the number of hours in a year. Calculation tools, I will tell you that I throw things in percentage calculators, free percentage calculators that are online all the time. Please, by all means, think about things like that. Like annual review, right? We always want to be looking at, measuring, and seeing, are there any changes to our time space? So take a look at that. And tax professionals that are experienced with home-based childcare businesses are key to being able to maximize your the allowable expenses that you have. So basically, you've done your time space calculation, right? We're going to think about when it comes to the actual expenses, we apply the time space percentage to expenses that are shared between business use and home. We have 100% deduction for allowable expenses that are used only for the spaces that are used only for the business, or an expense that is only used for the business. 8829, I kind of talked about that earlier. That's the business use of home tax form. If you have grants, please look and see how that money needs to be accounted for, and do you have to use time space when calculating the purchases, the grant money you used? Usually the answer is yes. And then I say time space, I say tax professional. We know that it is a nationwide problem for qualified family child care tax preparers. There, I am not denying that. Unfortunately, I do not have a list, but I will say, go out into your community, talk to people, other family child care providers. Who are they using? If you have a great tax preparer, pay it forward and share their name with someone else. It is hard to find. It's hard to find qualified child care, family child care tax preparers there. So basically what we have here is, what do we want to remember? Importance of calculations, regular use versus exclusive use, that process, the 6-step process, how everything is applied, record keeping, applying all of these properly, the percentage properly to your expenses for your taxes, right? Measure space, track hours, calculate the percentage, apply it to those expenses, seek professional help if needed. And I'm going to basically, Margaret's going to put something in the chat that is I have to read the actual title because I can never remember. Okay, so it's a guide, free guide, preparing for tax season, a guide for home-based childcare providers. This is the calculator that Margaret put the link in originally. You will find a link to this also in the Preparing for Tax Season, a guide for home-based childcare providers. So that guide has so much information in it. So if you happen to download this guide, you'll also see that the link to the calculator that Margaret has also given us, the direct link, it's in the guide for preparing for tax season, which is basically very much calculated for, or excuse me, I should say, arranged for family childcare with only family childcare in mind. It has lists of allowable expenses. The amount of information that is in that tax guide is amazing. So Margaret's putting those links in the chat, available in English and in Spanish. So